I started working at the Benson. It was a Latin American collection then. In 1965, September, I was a student, and I worked under Nettie Lee from 1965 to 1975, when she retired. I guess I could say she was made to retire. She didn't really want to go, but at the time the university did ask people who were 70 years old to vacate their administrative positions. So you know, she was, I think she was 70 years old. Anyway, so she left. She continued to teach though, and so that was good because she was around. And then from 1975 to 2000, I was head librarian. And you know, the whole 35 years were wonderful. It was amazing. I had done an undergraduate degree in library science and English at Our Lady of the Lake College in San Antonio. And I did library work because I didn't necessarily want to be a teacher. I wanted to go back to my hometown, Laredo, where there weren't very many opportunities for, I mean, what was I going to do, you know? So I had a counselor in high school who said, you know, why don't you think about library work? And I said, oh, that's an idea. I love libraries. I love books. I love to read. So that's how I got into library study of library science. Then the summer after I graduated from college, I came to UT to start my master's degree because, you know, to be certified to be a full-fledged librarian, you had to get a master's degree. So I did that. I started to work on my master's degree. And then during the year, I would go back to Laredo. I was working at Laredo Junior College Library. I was a librarian there because one of the librarians had left to go to continue on a PhD. So I got that job. So I was there for 2 years, but in the summers I was coming to UT. Then in '65, I decided I would come and stay. I wasn't going to go back to Laredo. And I needed a job, a half-time job. I was a library science student, graduate student, and I needed a half-time job. So there was an opening at the Latin American collection. And everybody said, oh my goodness, that's going to be tough because Nettie Lee is very strict. But, you know, well, she was a legend already. And I decided I would, you know, if she wanted me, I would take the job. I needed the job, and it was interesting. I was bilingual, so I could manage the materials. I could talk to visitors or students. So that's how I started. And the first year, I was a half-time graduate assistant, or I don't remember what they call them, library assistant, I think. And then the year after that, Ms. Benson managed to get some more positions, and one of them was as librarian 1 or something, a starting position. So I got that position, and then the rest is history, as they say. So that's how I started to work for Nettie Lee, first as a student, and we got along pretty well. And you know, she was a mentor because she liked to teach people, and I was lucky that we got along so well. She liked me, I liked her, and you know, we got along pretty well. And I could, you know, I could stand up for things that she believed in. I remember one time there were some of these, what they called, in the cataloging department, they called them Benson slivers, because there were these pamphlets that were put into these brown covers that were, I mean, they were just nothing. They were very slight publications, but she insisted on gathering them, and of course we were lucky that she did. At any rate, one time the cataloging department decided they would send all these Benson slivers down without any indication on the outside of the author and title, etc., that, you know, was nice to identify them and to be able to shelve them and to be able to handle them, actually. And so she wasn't around, and they brought this truck down, and I said, no, Ms. Benson wouldn't take them. So I'm not going to accept them. You have to take them back. So the head of the cataloging department came and said, well, why don't you take them? I said, because I know Miss Benson wouldn't want them like that. So he says, okay, I'll talk to her. So she was very impressed with that. So needless to say that, you know, that sort of endeared me to her, and she knew I was learning from her, and that I was, you know, following the precepts that she wanted to impart to her students and to, you know, to the future of the library.
When did you realize that being head librarian was in your future, and what did you bring to the job that was something new?
I'm not sure I brought anything new to the job. However, well, Miss Benson was teaching her history classes. She had just started when I started working at the library. I just started being part of the history department, and she had this famous seminar. And one of the students there was a man named Jim Breedlove, and he also worked at the library. And he was, in essence, he was looked upon as, and I think she considered him her successor. But then Jim got an offer he couldn't refuse. He was offered a job at Stanford University being the Latin American bibliographer. And, you know, Miss Benson was still in her prime, and she had time to go, and I think he was anxious to start doing, you know, his own thing, so to speak. He was a historian. I don't know that he finished his PhD because he hadn't finished his dissertation. But he was supposed to be the successor, you know, the heir apparent. And when he left, you know, Miss Benson had already also started her library science courses, because I think the Ford Foundation, started a program where they were giving scholarships to 5 students a year to do a library science degree, but focusing on Latin American bibliography. And Miss Benson was teaching 2 or 3 of those courses. So she had started that, and there were a few other students around that might have been the heir apparent, so to speak, after Jim left. But I was already at the library, and as I said, we got along fairly well. You know, we didn't have too many disagreements, and you know, but I knew what Miss Benson wanted, and we could work together. I worked for her. I shouldn't say work together, but I worked for her. But I was, you know, we were very compatible. I had been working there first as serials librarian, and then as assistant librarian, and so she sort of groomed me to succeed. And I remember one comment that Harold Billings, who was also another mentor, he was the director of libraries, and he says, you know, you don't have to. He says Nettie Lee's footprints need to be filled, but they don't need to be filled in the same way. So that was good for me because I was so much younger than Nettie Lee, obviously, so inexperienced relative to what her experience had been. But I had been there. When she retired, I had been there 10 years. So I think it was the experience of working with Nettie Lee, being, in essence, mentored by her, taught by her, that I guess I brought to the position. And so I think that's what I would say was my, you know, was the plus. And it was really, I mean, from the very beginning, being at the right place at the right time, you know. You know, I took this position as a student, and then I stayed because I liked the work, I liked the people I was working with, the materials were so interesting, and so the rest is history. I didn't do too many acquisitions trips because we had, you know, as the library started expanding and the staff started to expand, Don Gibbs became the bibliographer. So he, in essence, did more of the acquisition trips. I did travel to Mexico some, mostly to attend conferences, to meet with people, but I didn't do the extensive travel that other librarians have done, and certainly that Ms. Benson did. In the 60s, she really initiated a lot of the buying programs that later became standard practice, not only for this library, but for other libraries in the United States. Certainly being associated with a library was important for being able to, to get people to donate or to send materials. So often in Latin American libraries, there is no, there wasn't, I don't know if things have changed, I haven't kept up, but you didn't sell materials. If you have an institute of, say, of sociology or what have you, and they published materials, they publish the research of their faculty or their students. Sometimes they don't sell them, they will exchange them. And so it was that kind of material that we were looking for, that you can't get through normal commercial channels. And that was the reason for the acquisition strips more than anything. It wasn't that we were out looking for treasures for very unique collections. Now, sometimes we do go out and look at collections that we know are out there. But much of the travel that was done, that is being done, is to look for these out-of-the-way materials that you just don't get if you don't make contact, personal contact sometimes. So being part of a large library and being part of this library is important. People who visited the library, a lot of scholars from all over the world, really, to use Latin American materials. One of Ms. Benson's proteges or students from Japan, I don't remember if she actually was her student, but she would come regularly from Japan to use the library. Another one from the University of Turin in Italy. And I got to meet Octavio Paz, believe it or not. I got to meet Carlos Fuentes. And I remember Octavio Paz saying, "Why don't you look and see if you have all my books? I want you to buy all my books." And so we checked through the catalog and we checked through the acquisitions records to be sure we had them. It says, "Yes, you can buy them. Be sure you buy them." But he was very nice. It was just, a very intense man. And of course, Carlos Fuentes was so debonair and, good looking and just a really charming person. He spoke very well. In 1971, we moved into this building from the tower where the library had been forever and ever and ever, it seemed like. The move itself was, orchestrated by one of my colleagues in the main library. And we had to, decide where we're going to put these books, where we're going to put these other books, how are we going to arrange them. And then the actual move was moving these small bookshelves full of books. You move them from the shelf to this bookshelf, and then from the bookshelf to the shelves here. So it was a monumental task, but it was a learning experience for everybody. Needless to say. So that was one of the memorable experiences. And then, of course, being invited, quote unquote, to attend the inauguration of the Johnson Library, where he wasn't president any longer, but Lyndon B. Johnson was actually here, and Richard Nixon arrived in his helicopter and landed. He was the president. He landed at the baseball field, which was across the street where the Fine Arts Complex is now. The baseball field was there. And so here we were watching out, looking out at all of these events from up here from the library and just seeing all these people who were from the Congress and from Washington. And so that was memorable too. Art was, to me, I thought that was a good program to have to bring more people into the library, to expose them to the fact that the library was here It's always been sort of the hidden jewel on campus. You know, people may know about the Humanities Research Center, the Ransom Center. They may know about the Blanton, but they don't necessarily know about the Benson Latin American collection. And so art, in a sense, was a means to get people to come. And I remember one of the first exhibits that we did was a friend of mine who had gone to school with me at Our Lady of the Lake. And she was, we had lost contact. She was a Panamanian artist, and she had married an American Air Force officer and had traveled all over the world. But she came back to Austin, I think when they retired, and she looked me up and she says, "I'd love to have an exhibition." And I said, "Well, why don't we try it?" We had the hallway, which was just a perfect gallery. We had the tracks for lights on the ceiling, so we could, you know, try and do something. So I think that was one of the first attempts at having an art exhibition in the library. And I think it was pretty successful. So then we started continuing that program, and we would print invitations and send them out to people we knew were interested in Latin American studies, or all the faculty, and invited all the students, and just come and, you know, have a punch and cookies and come look at the art. And I think we got a fair number of people from the community also to come and look and experience the library. And so that was the purpose. The purpose was to bring people into the library, to make people notice the library, to be sure that they knew that, you know, there were materials here that could be of use to them or of interest to them, or not necessarily do research if you were from the community, but, you know, sometimes, you know, even faculty realized, "Oh, you have this. I didn't know you had this kind of material." So, so that was a purpose of the art exhibitions, and I think they've all continued and really flourished, which is, I'm very glad. We function as a team. I couldn't have, you know, really undertaken or done anything without the help of all of the staff that we have had. Wonderful people who have really dedicated their lives to the library. During the time I was here, Ann Hartness was assistant head librarian, and she was in charge of public services. Don Gibbs was a bibliographer, and he did a tremendous job with acquisitions and with trying to keep our programs up. We had to do a lot of maneuvering to try and have enough money. That's always a question. To buy books. I mean, because yes, you can get books as gifts or as donations or an exchange, but you also need to have money to buy. And so Don was also just tremendous. He knew so much about bibliography and about what was out there and how to talk to people about them. Jane Garner was in the rare books room. The Mexican American Library project started, I don't recall the exact year, but really it was a result of students agitating to get the libraries to collect materials on Latinos in the United States. And Harold Billings was instrumental in setting up the project so that it would function and materials would be acquired. There was a budget, etc. And it was part of the Benson Latin American collection, but it wasn't under my jurisdiction. It wasn't part of my administrative duties, rather. But as time went on, the project became a program because it was really well founded. It came under my my administration, and luckily we got some good people, and culminating with Margot, to really build that up. And so I'm very proud of that particular aspect of work that happened that got more and more important as time went on during the time that I was here. And it's continued because it has expanded. So we've been very lucky with that. You know, if I tried to resurrect all of the anecdotes about Nettie Lee, for example, and all of her, you know, all of the things that we experienced, that all of us experienced with her around, I'd have to really try to sit down and think about them. But it was you know, she left a legacy that all of us who were in some way associated with her, certainly during the time that I was here and during the time that Anne was here and Don were here, you know, we were sort of the links with her legacy. And one of the things that I think she would be very proud of is the fact that her legacy continues. We don't need to fulfill it in the same way. We need to don't do things the same way that she did. But we have continued to work towards pulling together the materials, the research documentation that scholars and students need for Latin American studies.